Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone.
We're just going to give a few seconds for everyone to get in the room.
Great to see everyone coming.
We'll get started in just a few more seconds.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have people continue to join us, but let's get started. I'm going to introduce Eliza Tudor from the Nevada County Arts Council and also board member of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates to welcome us and get us started today.
Thanks so much, Cara. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Northern Regional Conversation on the Arts. It's such an important conversation. Your voice is so important. As Cara said, my name is Eliza Tudor, she, her, hers, board member of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, executive director of Nevada County Arts Council, and an administrative lead for the Grass Valley, Nevada City and Truckee Cultural Districts. I join you in this capacity from the lands of the Nisenan and Washoe tribes. From my home office in Nevada City, I support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as their campaign to restore their federal recognition. And I'd like to introduce two amazing colleagues. With us today is Deborah Lucero, a fellow board member at Californians for the Arts and District 2 Supervisor for Butte County and President of Friends of the Arts Upstate. And I'm going to pass to David Reed, a fellow state local partner, Executive Director of Ubasata Arts, who's going to welcome and give us an overview of our agenda today, and then hand back to Cara, who's going to provide our meeting guidelines and a couple more introductions. David.
Thanks so much, Eliza. Great to be on the call. Thanks so much to the Californians for the Arts organizations for putting this together. What a tremendous agenda, action-packed 1 hour. I'll be brief. You all have the printed agenda in front of you, but once we get through our welcome and overview here, then we'll be back to Cara to go through more detail on the program. We'll look forward to the California Arts Advocates and Californians for the Arts updates led by Julie with an overview of accomplishments and budget allocations. There's so much exciting funding in the new budget that we're pleased to learn more about that on today's call. About halfway through, we'll look at field reflections and priorities and look at the survey and discuss. If you haven't looked at the survey yet, I did it before the call. It's great. It won't take you long to fill it out, but I think it'll inform a lot of new initiatives perhaps, and kind of fill in some of the blanks about some of the challenges we all face in the arts ecosystem. Then finally, we'll wrap up with local advocacy, discussing resources and discuss those. led by Eliza and Kara, along with some of our other SLPs, with a facilitated group discussion, and then finally wrap up with some closing remarks. Thanks so much. Over to you, Kara.
Thank you so much, David, and welcome everyone. My name is Kara Smith. I use she, her pronouns, and I am zooming in from Nisenan lands, also known as Sacramento, and I am the manager of programs and organizational advancement for Northern California for Californians for the Arts. And I'm joined with some colleagues who you'll also hear from today, who I want to shout out now. Tracy Hudak, who shares my title, but has the purview of Southern California, and my colleague Eduardo Robles, who's the manager of communications and field engagement, and our executive director, Julie Baker. And so you'll be hearing from all of us a little bit today. I just want to start out by with a little bit of housekeeping. Today, if you want to enable closed captioning, you can click the live transcript icon in your Zoom menu bar, and then it'll pop up for you. If you'd like to speak during the moments when we have discussion, you can use the raise hand function. You'll find that under reactions. You're also welcome to put questions and thoughts into the chat as we go along today. We'll be capturing that as well. We ask that you please stay muted when you're not speaking, just to help us have clarity of audio. And when we are in discussion, we ask that you please be mindful of your own input and the length of speaking given our short time here today together. And again, just please note that you can use the chat at any time to share resources. We'll be doing the same thing. We'll also collate all those resources and share them with you in a follow-up email along with a recording of this meeting. So just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be shared with attendees of the meeting. And now I'd like to hand it over to Julie Baker to offer updates from Californians for the Arts as well as California's arts advocates.
Thanks so much, Kara, and thanks everyone. My name is Julie Baker. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming from the land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan, the unceded land, and otherwise known as Nevada City, California, the same town as Eliza and some of the others on this call, like Jesse. Nice to see you. It's great to be in part of our region for this regional conversation. We do 11 of these across the state. And apologies for my hoarse voice. But I'm glad I could be here today. Yesterday, I was unable to attend the regional conversation because I had no voice. I just want to give an overview of the organizations. We have two, and why do we have two? So California Arts Advocates is our lobbying organization. It is a C4. We employ a lobbyist in Sacramento to influence legislation, budgets, and resources to access rooms that we maybe have never been in before to talk about the arts, culture, and creative industries and workforce. We do a lot of lobbying currently. I'm doing a lot of that right now when I wear my CAA hat, where I throw on these other glasses that now I'm CAA, and now I'm going to switch back to CFTA. And Californians for the Arts is a nonprofit arts organization. Really there we work to build public awareness of the impact of our industry and the workforce, as well as be a service organization to help others to become effective arts advocates throughout California, both on the local, state, and federal level. Next slide. Just briefly, this is our third iteration of regional conversations. They were born out of the beginning of COVID, when we recognized that there was incredible deep impact, particularly to disproportionate impact to our industry. We needed to gather, we needed to talk, we needed to understand, and as your advocacy organization, we needed to lift that up. Out of that, really, we learned so much that informed both our direct lobbying and efforts and well as our public awareness campaigns. And since we're still in a pandemic, it makes sense for us to continue these. And I have to tell you how valuable they are for us to learn. This is an enormous state, the 5th largest economy in the world. Every region is different. And so we're grateful for those of you who are in attendance today. Main thing we learned is that you like them and you wanted us to do it again. So we will do these annually. Next slide. I wanted to just share also who we are as an organization, what we're committed to. This is a journey that we are on to be an anti-racist organization. And I say it's a journey because yes, we've written the statements. Yes, we've hired the consultants. Yes, we're doing everything we can to diversify our board, our programming, our outreach, and being intentional in every effort to do that. But we know that that is never enough to undo 400 years of oppression and systemic racism. And so everything that we do, we hold ourselves accountable to trying to make that change both internally and externally in the policies that we developed and what we work towards in terms of equity for the industry. So we ask you to hold us accountable to that as well. And we do our best to be as transparent as possible in our efforts along this journey, and invite you to join us. I know many of you are in this work as well. Next slide. Just briefly, I wanted to touch on what we all accomplished together in this last year. 2021 was a devastating year for the arts, but it was also a turning point for the arts in many ways. We really worked both nationally, locally, and at the state level to raise awareness of what was the impact of COVID, but also to showcase how we can be a part of the solution to both the nation and our local and our statewide recovery, and why we're so desperately needed. And I think for the first time, even though all of us as arts advocates or people in the arts have known that, I think people now, when they were faced with not having it, recognized how essential we are. And so now I think it's really an issue of how do we continue this? So this is not just a one-time blip in historic funding. Over $600 million is invested last year. We saw our first creative workforce bill signed in the state. You engaged at historic and incredible levels. And we saw mayors and other civic leaders also lift up how critical we are. We hope that this continues because this one time is historic, but sustaining is transformative. Next slide. Again, I'll just quickly highlight, some of you participated in our survey that we did last year. This really helped us to educate the legislature, policymakers to what was the direct impact and why we needed additional funding and relief, and also why we needed the legislation. I have to say that we released our survey with the Otis report, which is often utilized here in the state to showcase the creative economy in numbers. And we were actually quoted in the New York Times that if the state didn't act to support us at this moment in time, that California could face a cultural depression. I just mentioned this because building media awareness is such a critical piece of effective advocacy, and particularly if you can get into large publications like that, but it's also really critical in your local media as well. We did a lot of different kind of campaigns. Restart Arts California, Artists Are Second Responders. Some of you, Leslie here from Ink People, was on our statewide opening task force. That was really critical for us to come together when it was only a year ago that we didn't even have guidelines for how the arts could reopen. We were really trying to understand what we needed to do to reopen safely. And many of you also maybe have benefited from our services with applying for the California Relief Grant and the California Venues Grant Program, as well as in this last year when the California Arts Council in July mentioned that came out with only 21% of applicants being funded. We immediately mobilized the field. Close to 1,100 of you signed a petition, and we were able to persuade the Arts Council to release more funding immediately to adjudicated grants. So we just want to showcase once again how advocacy works, but it only works when you engage. So thank you. Next slide. On CAA highlights, that's directly where we're lobbying. We sponsored the California Creative Workforce Act, which was an exciting moment for those of you who live in Nevada City. You can appreciate that I was sitting here on Manzanita-Diggins where I live. And I got a text saying the governor's just signed the bill. It was a super exciting moment. It is definitely not like Schoolhouse Rock in terms of getting a bill signed. It's a lot of work. And again, thank you to all of you who worked with us to make that happen. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a second. We really worked a lot on reopening guidelines and working very closely with California Department of Public Health, as well as GOBIZ, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, explaining how and why the arts should be reopened when restaurants are opened, bowling alleys were opened, but we were not, and how we were actually an industry that cares deeply about safety and could be a part of the solution in terms of communication of messages around why people need to adhere to public health messaging, in a way that only artists can really translate into communication styles of empathy that are culturally specific as well, which resulted in, as you'll see soon, some funding for the California Creative Corps in addition. We'll go to the next slide. All of this will be available for you to view if you're interested. Those are hyperlinks too, so you can read more. In terms of where we are right now, so we got over $600 million. You ask, where's the money and how can I get it? So the first one on this list happens to be the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grants Program. This was in direct relationship to the impact of AB 5 on small budget nonprofit arts organizations under $2 million. This program will go through California Office of Small Business Advocate. They just put out the request for proposal, and we expect it should be open in early March for organizations to apply. And that was for grants to support payroll up to $75,000. In addition, there was $150 million. We worked in coalition and continue to work in coalition with National Independent Venues Association of California and the California Association of Museums. And we got $150 million for a venues and live events program. The grants up to $250,000. That is opened and already closed, but we are currently lobbying to see if we can reopen it and also loosen some of the restrictions in terms of things like NAICS codes and some of the other things, which I won't get into too much detail, but again, stay tuned and definitely sign up for our e-list if these are of interest to you. If you're a museum, the museum grant program has just opened. This links to the way that you can apply, and that is for museums that have been impacted by COVID, as well as ones prioritizing ones that work in Title I districts. Creative youth development, $40 million went to the California Arts Council last year. Some of those programs you'll see in a second when those are coming out. And then the California Creative Corps pilot program got $60 million. Next slide. Sorry. In terms of creative youth development, this is an area of focus that has been developed throughout the nation. There are many funders that focus on what they call CYD, and it's really a way to transform youth's lives through multi-generation, I can't say it. Anyway, many generations relationships with artists, and in deep learning centered in arts, but also in social justice, community engagement. The Arts Council is utilizing these funds specifically for existing current programs, Youth Arts Action, Artisan Schools, Arts Education Exposure, Jumpstarts, and Arts Integration Training. One of the programs is opened, or currently, the rest should be opening Grant Cycle B, which will be opened in the spring. Next slide. So for those of you who got a lot of arts ed funding in the years prior, and then they changed it and you could only apply for an impact grant in the last year, and this year it'll change again and you'll be able to apply for these. $60 million for the Creative Corps pilot program, which I mentioned was something that our organization worked with a number of other leaders across the state to educate the administration, the Newsom administration, on how artists can be utilized to effectively communicate important messages, whether that's around wildfire preparedness, which is really important to our communities, COVID, pandemic, civic, social engagement. And so this program is launching soon through the Arts Council, and you'll be able to apply for that. And we've got a link of a city-based core program that was introduced in San Francisco that much of this was modeled after, that you can learn more about as well. Next slide. Sorry. Let me just give a quick overview of the budget, how the California budget works. You know, when you're deep in advocacy, it's really important that you understand the process. So I encourage you to understand your own local budget process when your supervisors, your city council members meet and make these decisions. But my job is to understand it at the state level. And so at the state level, where we are right now in beginning of February, is the governor has introduced his budget. Now the legislature analyzes it. They review it in certain budget subcommittees. They determine if they think it's a good idea or not. They get analysis on it from the Legislative Analyst Office, or what they call the LAO. They basically quiz the administration and say, why? Why is this a good use of funding? And then the legislature is allowed to also introduce their own budget items. What do they think should be brought and how do we spend, I think it's what $267 billion that the state of California has in the budget. So what the governor introduced in January was a baseline for the Arts Council to just remain at 26 million. And then he introduced support for cultural districts, which I know, of course, our community, Nevada County, is a part of, as well as I know Deborah's community is also part of. And that would be $30 million over 3 years in one-time funds to be sent to fund the 14 existing pilot programs, as well as to expand the program. So we're very much in support of this. We're really excited that's been introduced. There's been a lot of advocacy from the coalition, Cultural Districts Coalition, as well as our organization and others to make that happen. Governor also introduced just under $200,000 for their literary programs, the California Poet Laureate and Youth Poet Laureate program. And then a new program in conjunction with state parks, just 50 million one-time fund for arts installations, not monuments, but for performances, for sculptures, for 3D installations. Exciting new program. We love to see arts integrated into other state agencies like the parks, like Office of Small Business Advocate. It's really important that we're seen not just siloed as arts, but integral to all aspects of life and workforce and the economy. And then finally, the governor introduced almost $1 billion in arts education funding from Prop 98 General Fund to expand learning opportunities after school and summer K through 6. So that's another exciting thing. There's a lot of money being talked about for arts education in this year's budget and in another issue that I'll talk about in a second. In May, the governor will introduce a May revise. You'll be asked as advocates to engage with us in this process when there's need for you to send in letters to your legislators and to engage with us in Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month during Advocacy Week, where you get a chance to really share why it's critically important that the state invests in arts at this time and at all times. Excuse me, next slide. I haven't talked this much since I lost my voice. So what are our advocacy priorities this year? Primarily for California Arts Advocates, which is our lobbying side, and then California for the Arts will build awareness so that you can be effective in advocating also with us. One is for the California Creative Workforce Act, which we're so grateful the governor signed, but it was without an appropriation. In other words, it's great socializing language that says the creative industries are critical to the state of California, the workforce, and that they want to diversify it. They want to artists and arts workers to get a living wage. This is what we fought for in the language of the bill, but without an appropriation, we can't actually operationalize. And so we're asking for $50 million. Again, we need a legislator to introduce that. And we are hopeful that we'll see that coming soon. SB 805 was introduced last year by Senator Susan Rubio. This was vetoed by the governor. This was directly trying to address the impact of AB 5. Instead, it got into the budget. We are working with the coalition to see next steps on that. I mentioned the California Arts Council's budget is ongoing budget is at $26 million. One of the things that we are advocating for right now and looking again for a legislator to introduce is to raise that to $1 per capita or $40 million in ongoing funding, at least for the next 3 years, or $42 million ask. One of the issues that we're seeing and what we're hearing from you and why it's so important for us to hear from you is these one-time funding pots are great, but really what we need is sustainable funding for the sector for us to do already the good work that you do and to sustain it. So we say we want to put good money after good money. They invested so much money last year. Now they need to put money where we can actually sustain our sector. And part of where we see some of the issues where the Arts Council is, for example, prioritizing 250,000 and under organizations in terms of supporting racial equity, which we understand, but it's also making it harder for some organizations to get funding from the Arts Council. We think that this is also because there's so little money. So if we grow the pot, there's more money for everyone to access. So we hope you'll work with us to see that happen. And the other pieces you've already seen us mention, which we support. And then finally, there is a potential ballot measure. They have to get about 1 million signatures by June for arts education for $800 million from the general fund, meaning the overall budget every year. If this ballot measure passed, they'd have to spend 1% of the general fund, which is about $800 million, would have to go to, or some, not 1% of the general fund, but 1%, some mechanism, but it's approximately $800 million to go to arts education. We know that a very high number, I think it's something like 80% of K through 12 schools are not actually doing arts education as they are mandated to do. And so this would actually make sure that there's money for it and accountability. So stay tuned for more information on how you can get involved in that. Our board will be determining if we are actively supporting that measure very soon. Create California, who's our partner in advocacy, specifically on arts education, has already said they're supporting it. So we encourage you to look at their website as well. Next slide. I think I'm almost at the end. This is a little bit more information on the California Creative Workforce Act, which I've mentioned already. So this will be in your slide deck. We can go to the next slide. And just quickly, again, I just want to mention, and I think I'm up here, and hopefully I haven't gone over my time, on federal advocacy. Federal is out here, where state is here, and then your local is here. Federal is where they can print money, as we know, although now we're looking at some inflation. And so federal advocacy is really critical, and we're very involved in that as well. I serve on several, I'm the state captain for Americans for the Arts for federal advocacy, and then also for the Cultural Advocacy Group, that is a national group that we work on federal policy, arts and culture policy. And then I'm also the co-chair of the Western Arts Advocacy Network through WestAF, where 13 regions get together and also talk about cultural policy. What's exciting this year is there are actually 7 pieces of legislation currently introduced in Congress that are for the creative economy. Our very own Senator Padilla and Representative Jay Obernolte are in support of the Creative Economy Revitalization Act, which is a $300 million allocation for a WPA-like program for the 21st century. So more information is on our website around these and in our email blast that we actually just sent out today. Just like the state budget here, there's appropriations at the federal level for the federal agencies, the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Some of you may have received funding from both of those organizations. It's really critical that we see more money going into those as well. And both of them have increased appropriations this year in the ask, and nothing has passed yet. There's some other things that I will mention here on here that I'll just, you can read later. And then what was exciting too this year, for the first time, the Small Business Committee heard a briefing, a hearing on the power, peril, and promise of the creative economy. Representative Judy Chu and Young Kim sit on that committee, and Chu has since followed up with SBA asking for a focus on our sector. So this is really exciting. And again, like I said, I think what we've seen this last year is just this tremendous pivot for our sector to be highlighted, to be seen as valued, and for us to actually see, hopefully, historic, not just one time, but ongoing and transformative investments for our industry. So with that, I think the next slide just shows that what you're going to get in your packets too. I'm not going to have them play now. Some wonderful videos from State Senator Ben Allen. We have many champions in the legislature for our sector. Allen chairs the Joint Committee on the Arts, and so we're really grateful for all his support. And he authored the California Creative Workforce Act. In our region, the Dollies have been always, I think, very supportive of the arts. Senator Nielsen is a tremendous supporter of the arts, sits on the Joint Committee. And then at the state level, the federal level, Senator Alex Padilla is just terrific, again, also in supporting for the arts. So it's comforting for all of us to know that our legislators are there and representing us in a way that can really help affect change. So thank you for your time and listening. And I think now I hand it back to Kara.
Thanks, Julie. So that was a lot of information, a lot of great information. So we wanted to take a moment to enter into discussion and to start by just asking if there are any questions about the updates that Julie provided. Anything we can answer.
I just want to say hi and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Maria Shahed, And I tried and right now I'm trying to open my camera. I can't. I have no idea what went wrong today, but thank you for this opportunity and nice to see everybody. And sorry for being so late.
Thank you. We're glad you were able to make it. And let's see, Troy, I see there's a question in the chat. I'm just going to pick this up here. Funding for the state local partners appear to be underrepresented in this round of budget requests. Could someone address this aspect of the CAC budget request?
Sure, Troy, I can just mention it, and I'm sure Eliza and others can jump in too. But basically, SLP funding, state local partner funding, comes under local assistance, which is under the purview of the council. And so the council gets to determine how much funding and what is the grant award for SLPs to apply for. And I believe this year it did increase. Is that right, Eliza? I think, I apologize. I don't remember.
It increased marginally. We had been hoping to forge a deeper partnership to remain true to the actual idea of a partnership. But we're hoping that we're going in the right direction. And but it was a small, a nominal increase this year. But we hope for more.
Awesome. I see a question about the governor veto on SB 805. What we know about that is that basically what was in that bill essentially got into the budget. And so the governor didn't feel like it was important. It made sense to then have legislation as well. And so essentially told them that he was likely not going to sign it. But the Senator Rubio's office determined that it was worth at least sending up to his, what they call, to the, what do they call it, the shoehorn. So anyway, it's his area of the building. And so, but he vetoed it. So mostly I think it was that it was in the budget, but I think that that coalition is going back to the drawing board, working more closely with labor, which will be very, very important to have their support on this, to address how to continue to look at the impact of AB5 on our industry, while encouraging further investments so we can see artists and arts workers get a living wage. Deborah's asking how the 30 million for cultural districts will be allocated. There's not a lot yet in the budget ask specifically on, it shares like how much over years, but it doesn't over the 3 years, but it doesn't tell yet how the council would, either fund the pilots or fund expansion. That is something where either the legislature, and you'll see if you go to the budget sub 4 hearings where they're going to ask the council to talk about, the 30 million, for example, that's when the legislature can ask those type of questions and say, how are you going to spend this 30 million, and get very specific. Typically, because CAC works with the council, as you know, a lot of times the legislature kind of allows them to figure it out later. But the more we advocate to the legislature, if you want to see it a little bit more prescriptive to CAC, that's how you would impact that. I don't know, Kara, are there other questions you wanted to ask during this time period?
Yes. So we also want to hear from you outside of just what we presented. We know that this is a large and geographically diverse region, and we're glad to have all of you in the room here today. So we also want to hear from you about what your needs and priorities are, especially if you have something that maybe we didn't address that's been pressing on you. How are you doing with COVID-19 relief, and what types of funding are you seeking to access, and what challenges are you having in the work that you're trying to accomplish with arts and culture in your region, in your district? So we'll hope that you will share with us, because hearing from you is very important, and is why we're here today. Yes, Leslie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. A few things come to mind. I'm sure there's more, but of course, and I appreciate that you're looking at funding for larger organizations. And again, that there are ways of larger organizations working, collaboratively with smaller organizations. And that being said, one of the things that comes to my mind is, often, we have a very close-knit, region in terms of artists and arts organizations, but often we're, in the position of competing with one another for grants. So, again, it's just kind of a dream of some way that we can work more collaboratively to ensure the success of the entire, field. And, I always celebrate the successes of, our partner organizations, but it's, and we kind of mourn when one or another doesn't get funded. So I think ways to really look at the success of an overall region. And then of course, flexible funding is always a dream out there.
Thanks, Leslie. That's great. Absolutely. I think that's part of why we really want to see the general baseline funding for the Arts Council increase to 40 million, because that's where you can see that sort of flexible funding, and then we can advocate for that. And in terms of, Leslie, would you just say which region you're from? You're from Humboldt, is that right, County? Yeah.
Yep.
So if you do raise your hand to speak, please do introduce which county you're coming from, since our region here is so large. Deborah.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for all of your important information. It's so thorough and so exciting after so many years of not seeing this type of advocacy on behalf of arts in California, in such a creative state that we live in. I was just curious, how likely do you think it is that we are actually going to get a $1 per capita in the state of California? That would be amazing. That would be a real commitment to the arts, and it's something that's long overdue. And is there momentum for it?
Thanks, Deborah, for that question. I mean, I met today with the consultant or the staffer to the chair of the budget committee that hears the CAC's budget. And we said, we're in support of all of these things, but we want this dollar for the arts, and explained why and where we stand in relationship to other states, and why this was so important in terms of the sustainability of the sector. And their response was, this is not an unreasonable request. I don't see why the chair wouldn't support it. Now, that being said, we have to have a legislator introduce it. And then we have to have widespread support from the legislature and then the administration. So it's a long road ahead. The budget process lasts, as that slide shows, until at least June. What I will share is that all of you engaging in this process, when we send out action alerts and say, please send in letters of support, please join us in Advocacy Week in April, does make a difference. I can share that last year, we submitted over 5,000 letters asking for the $1 billion for the recovery of our sector. By the time we met with the governor's office, which we do often to do our advocacy, they're like, yeah, we know, you want $1 billion. So they read these things, they see them. And Deborah, you're an elected official, you know how important, particularly in an election year, the voice of your constituents are. So we just, I think it's a very reasonable ask. I think if there's ever a time to do it, it's now, because there is a $45 billion budget surplus in the state of California. So for an industry that is close to 8% of the state's gross domestic product, to ask for $40 million a year to make sure that every county in the state of California receives some aspect of arts funding. Because the other thing about the Arts Council, as you all know, it is the only public funding source for every county in the state to access, right? There is no other way for us to access public funding, except for these kind of one-time fun, shiny projects. And many of us who live in rural communities, I think most of us who are on this call, we don't have philanthropy. We don't have access to philanthropy like the urban areas do, and concentrated like in LA and other places. So really where we can get our funding from is the state. And so it's really critical that they understand that, but we need your help to do it. It can't just be me showing up in these rooms. It has to be a critical mass. And that's why it worked last year. Honestly, it really did. So thanks for everyone who signed the letters and did everything, but we're not done. So keep showing up. Is that
Thank you.
the answer? Okay, thanks. Calder, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi, and I'm from Humboldt County as well. Hi, everyone. This isn't related as closely to funding, but it is related to COVID, and it is related to some of the efforts that Californians for the Arts were doing earlier. You were talking about the reopening guidelines nearly a year ago now. But we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and personally, I know that, like, for myself, leading a performing arts organization, I'm just really hoping for moving forwards more communication and more transparency from both state public health as well as local public health, because a lot of decisions are still being made at those levels about what are safe gatherings. For example, Sonoma County recently had a restriction on over 50 gatherings. And while I support these measures completely, I support public health in making whatever kind of decisions they need to make in order to protect people in individual counties. But it would be just very, very nice to actually have more transparency in how those decisions are being made, to feel more included in those conversations and welcome at that table. And many other times it's just been like, hey, we just decided this, and there's nothing else to go with it.
So Calder, thank you for that. I can share with you, we worked really closely with California Department of Public Health, and continue to have a very open door with them in collaboration. Honestly, they were very collaborative with us and earnest and eager to get us back up and running within the emerging, things that were happening. As you can see, the state is sort of pulled out of this business, right? They don't want to be in the business of telling businesses how to do it, for a myriad of reasons, and they've really put it more on the locals. So at this point, I think what I would recommend to you, which is what we did at the state level, is that if you can create your own local task force of arts organizations to mobilize and to work and to contact public health, ask for a meeting, share with them what you're doing, and ask for them to collaborate with you when they're making decisions around your industry. In my case, it was very well received at the state. They really welcomed it. Local level, the only thing I can share with my own experience here in my own community is that they're incredibly understaffed. And so, and they're dealing, as you know, with an ongoing pandemic. And so, but I think if you're showing up as saying, we want to be part of the solution, we're not here to cause we support you, we want to be part of the solution, but we want to also share with you our expertise and how we can help you. We did things like the state level, talking to them about pop-up vaccine clinics when performing arts centers are closed during the day, having pop-up vaccine clinics at major, like we work with Live Nation to do at big shows. They were so grateful for our support in that. So that would be my recommendation, is to make as much as you can in terms of the effort to mobilize locally. Robin, I think your hand is up.
It is, and thank you so much. It is beyond exciting to have been watching the progression of dollars coming into the Arts Council, and the fact that there's actually money allocated for the cultural districts. Julie, you gave us a little bit of the $30 million, but we don't know how it's going to be allocated to the pilots or to building new programs. But I can tell you that receiving the cultural district designation was so important for our rural county. It has made a difference, and we've been able to leverage that designation to become a part of our outreach, and it has been an economic driver. And so looking beyond COVID, the district really needs to have continued support. And with state funds, we can continue to leverage our local investment and our partnerships. With us, I've got Stuart Baker here is a partner of our cultural district. We're the Grass Valley, Nevada City Cultural District here in Nevada County, and our two cities, our two chambers, and Nevada County Arts Council are the partnership. And we've done, as we've really been dedicated to sustaining the cultural district outreach and supporting its designation, but we now need funding. We've all been casualties of COVID. So learning more about how this program will benefit our 14 cultural districts would be amazing. And we look to you to be our advocate, of course, and to keep us abreast of.
So what I'll share too is that, again, where we are in the budget process is that the governor's introduced that. That means you've got the administration support for $30 million. It was actually something that the Arts Council requested themselves to the administration. Administration supported it. Now what you have to do is convince the legislature that this is a good use of dollars. I don't anticipate it's going to be a major issue. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. And it is something that is a bill that was passed in 2016 by the legislature. So it's now putting funding behind something that the legislature wants to see happen. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't advocate for it. So Robin, what I'm going to say to you and Stuart is you need to communicate to your elected officials. I think it's both the Dollies and the state representative in the state house, and tell them how critical that funding is, why it matters. Organize your community to send in letters of support for that budget. And as we send out action alerts of when you need to show up to make phone calls, you can make public comment like you do at your supervisor meetings and your local meetings. You can do that at the state as well. We encourage you to do that. So the more that they see that the communities are watching and that the communities are engaged and that they care about it, the more likely it is to get through. And of course, we'll do everything we can at the sort of what we call the grass tops level to make sure that all the legislators, I literally meet with legislators on a daily basis to make sure that they're aware that this is an important funding for our sector. So thank you for that. And stay tuned. Just definitely keep in touch with us.
And thanks for giving us the pathway.
You bet. Yeah, you bet. Hi, BJ. Did you want to join? I'm going through.
Unmute. First, I just want to say thank you, and I don't want to take a lot of time doing that. And I just had a comment in response to Calder Johnson and trying to put on an event we're Sierra County Arts Council. We're very rural. And what I discovered when we're trying to do the Banff Mountain Film Festival is that there really isn't any restrictions right now except for on mega events. This is my understanding anyway. And our local public health department really didn't have much to tell us. So where we turned were to other arts organizations to see how they felt, what they felt was safe for their venue. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing like 75% capacity, masks, vaccine mandates, and our board is basically the driver behind that. It's not any government agency or somebody else telling us what to do. It's our decision to try and protect the health and safety of the volunteers, the workers, and the audience. And I would be interested in the park installation stuff, but I'll find out about that another day or some other way.
Yeah, no, quickly, BJ, yeah, for sure. I think that what we are telling in all of our meetings is letting them know that there's continued impact of COVID to our sector. It is no longer typically the government that is doing it. It is self, we're trying to keep our communities and our patrons and our performers safe. And so that we're also looking for continued relief funding in that way as well. But I think that's right. And then the second piece on the parks, again, this early part of the budget just got introduced. If that's something you all want to see happen, it's the same process. You got to let your legislators know you want it to happen, you support it. And so that when it comes up in committee, they see that and they say, okay, my district supports it. Stuart.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Stuart Baker with the Nevada City Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to repeat everything Robin had said in terms of support for the cultural district. One thing Eliza and I are going to be embarking on in the next few months, Nevada City is historically a very cultural place in terms of our historic district, doesn't see a lot of change. And our city council has recently agreed to look at having a public art process and incorporating more public art into our community. And so I would love to get, if people have ideas of what worked in their, what has worked in their community, rural community, wherever you are, I'd love to hear ideas that has worked in terms of getting council people interested in getting them a little closer to the edge about creativity and seeing how we can involve the community and moving forward together to bring more public art into our public space. So that's it.
Terrific, Stuart, and no relation, even though we live in the same community. Stuart, why don't you put your contact information in the chat, and if anyone has experience with convincing your local city government to put a public art ordinance in, please share with Stuart.
Perfect, will do.
Thank you. Nancy, I love it. You guys are so engaged. I love it. Thank you.
Hi there from Shasta County. My question relates to the funding of the rural communities, as we all are. It seemed to me when I did an analysis of it that a good portion of the funds went south of Sacramento rather than north of Sacramento for the COVID relief funding. And I think some of it was probably related to the diversity component that they're now adding into all of the granting processes. How do we navigate that, especially when we live in a community specific to not having a huge diversity opportunity? There's not as much diversity in some of our rural areas as we would like. And so we're sort of penalized for that in terms of funding, I would assume. Not specific or intentional, it's just the way it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, for lifting that up. I think, you know, there's a lot of emphasis and should be on racial equity, as we know that has been, without that, we're really never going to move beyond what's happened here in our country. And we know that those are the people, you know, based on race, have been discriminated against and have not received access to funding. However, we also know that there needs to be aspects of geographic equity as well. And I think that it's a challenge when there's so little money. And that's part of what we're finding, is that there's a scarcity mentality, right? So, and there isn't that much money. And that's why we're trying to always increase it. I think what's important there, Nancy, is and I know the SLPs are engaging with us on this, which is we're really trying to gather data on what has happened for our rural communities with this emphasis. And again, it should never be that we're pitted against, you know, I think that's really, really important. And we know as our organization, we're very committed, as I mentioned, as I said, to being an anti-racist organization. And that means that we also would prioritize racial equity as the Arts Council has. Our hope would be that there would be enough money, especially public funding, to recognize where there are areas that have also been disproportionately disinvested in, which includes rural communities. And so I think that this is something that, I know you have a champion, the CAC's leader, and Bound Crawford comes from a rural community, and she absolutely understands that. So I think it's important that we continue to increase the funding, that we continue to address why public funding is necessary and where are the gaps, and the impact that makes. I also want to say that I live in the second whitest county in California, Nevada County, and yet there are people of color here, and there are indigenous people here. And so we can find the way to also emphasize that within our own communities to make sure that we are own. Yes, we're in our white community, but we are prioritizing also in our communities, making sure that that investment's happening. So, and I know that Eliza has done that here with Nevada County Arts Council. I think I hate to stop conversation because this is the reason we are doing this. And I'm going to defer to the leaders who are running this on where we should go. What I think we should do is I'm going to let Eduardo introduce this, and then we'll get a chance to talk. So if you haven't been addressed, Lynn, Mary, Leslie, I saw some important comments in the chat. We'll get to you, I promise. If we have addressed, please take your hand down. And then I'm going to hand it to Eduardo, my team member.
Hi, everybody. Northern California. Great conversation, and it's a perfect segue to our regional conversations poll. Like Julie mentioned, a lot of this data drives a lot of the policy initiatives that we do, and so your opinion is highly valued. It shapes our policy making. So do take some time and fill it out completely and submit it. Because we are going to assess it and use it. It's going to be dropped in the link. I mean, in the chat. Take 5 to 7 minutes, and if you don't finish, leave your tab open and come back and do complete it. We'll see you in 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you so much.
I apologize. How do we access the link? Through the chat or?
Yes, it's in the chat.
All right, thanks.
should we try to wrap it up in the next minute? And you can come back and complete it after the regional conversation if you like.
Great. Thank you everyone for filling that out. And we want to jump back into conversation. I know there's still a few outstanding questions in the chat and folks' hands raised. So we want to take time to get to that. And within this space of conversation, it's kind of related to Stuart's sharing as well, as we want folks to be able to share some specific advocacy wins on your local level as a way of sort of showing, talking to each other about what has worked in your communities as a sort of a peer-to-peer sharing effort. And so hoping some folks will also speak up about that as we continue the dialogue and can respond to some of the questions that exist in our atmosphere right now, which are also related to local advocacy.
Kara, did you want us to wrap the last? Do you want me to answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, I thought that'd be great, especially even, I know we had a few questions in the chat as well, even from Patricia, and I think that's actually directly related a little bit to this local advocacy.
Sure. So and Patricia, I saw your comment. I was starting to type, which was, how are we going to take, I'll just repeat it here. I have to go back. What specific new or additional actions are we willing to undertake our organization to explicitly support the needs of the Northern California region as solicited by us and articulated herein by participants? So thank you for that question. It's really important. Don't want it to just be all talk, right? You need some action. And so what's important for us is that this is why this is called a conversation. This is what we're doing to gather input. That's why we ask for you to fill out the survey. I think it's what we do after this is we will summarize what we're learning. It will inform our daily lobbying activities that we're doing and lifting those up. We will also respond to your region directly with what we're hearing and what we see as actions that maybe you need to be taking specifically, whether that's locally or at the state level with your representatives, vis-a-vis some of the things that we're hearing right now. So it will develop into an action plan on our end. And then of course, but I just want to share too, is that we ourselves are a very small organization. We have 27 amazing board members, which we have Deborah Lucera here. We have Eliza Tudor, and I believe Victoria Hamilton is here with us who is the board president for California Arts Advocates, who's based in San Diego. And then we have a very small staff. We have 4 people on our staff, and that's just new for us to be full-time. My point of that is not to say any excuses. We work extremely hard and we do what we can. My point is that advocacy is never one organization alone. It is never one person alone. It is the power of all of us working together to do this. We are happy to provide you the tools. We're happy to provide you the pathway to make that happen, but you have got to engage as well. So we will circle back. Ooh, that horrible statement. It gets memed everywhere. We will bring you our action plans once we complete all of these by the end of February. And then in April, we have Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, which I know we'll talk about in a minute. And that is really a very clear way for you to engage and can influence the process of the budget, which is what we are working on a lot this year. So hopefully that answers that. Leslie, you asked about, Patricia, you're also welcome to reach out to me anytime. Leslie, you asked about which legislators would be good to introduce the dollar for the arts. That's something that we're currently working on, identifying who those are. Typically are the chairs of the Joint Committee on the Arts, people who are already engaged in that. We are talking to the people who chair the budget subcommittees that actually hold that piece of the pie. And so I met with them today. In fact, I have to jump off at 3:30 to have a meeting with a consultant to that. So eventually we will get to a place where hopefully that will be introduced, and we'll see that happen. So we'll keep you informed how you can help. I'll just quickly go to Nancy and then Mary, and then I'll hand it off to Eliza. Nancy Hill.
Sorry, darling, I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay, sorry. Hi, Mary, with your fabulous, it looks like a bow on. You unmute.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of cold. I'm in Butte County. I'm with the Chico Arts and Culture Foundation. And having been around for a lot of years, I really have seen the ups and downs and really applaud everybody's effort in so many of the increases and in funding and being right ready to help with all the things that have happened in the last couple of years. But I had a question, Julie. I was interested, just since you're probably behind the scenes a lot, that's your work and your job, how the arts are kind of talked about as being at the table in a bigger way to solve problems, right? Like, and this is a little bit off topic, but kind of part of all the topics of today. But for example, I'm on the Chico Arts Commission and City of Chico Arts Commission, and we had city staff come to us at our last meeting. They're applying for a Clean Cities grant, and it's through the state of California. And to me, what they're proposing is kind of interesting, and I'm a little suspicious just because we, as most everybody, we deal with huge unhoused populations, and the area that they are proposing to apply this grant to is really impacted by unhoused. And I really see artists and creative thinkers as being key problem solvers. And do our legislatures, the staffs that at a state level and the elected officials, I mean, are we still just out? Are we just decoration after still, or entertainment? Or, I mean, are you seeing a shift at all in that? I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I just have this opportunity to ask you this, and I'm always really curious if that dial is moving at all.
It's a great question, and Mary, and this is exactly what we talk about in terms of the narrative. We don't go in and say arts need a handout, arts are entertainment. We talk that arts are a part of the solution. Artists are second responders, artists are work, artists are jobs, arts are healing, arts can be the communicators, can build empathy. We bring all of those pieces and parts to our conversations, and what's important is that you have to, as you can imagine, it has to be, you have to understand who you're talking to, right? So certain legislators are going to be really interested in how do arts heal veterans, right? And trauma. We have a massive mental health problem with our youth and with our communities in general. What's the relationship that arts can do there? Arts and transportation. Governor Newsom put in, I think it was $1.6 billion last year for an initiative called Clean California. Originally had $75 million in it for artists. The legislature, for whatever reason, took that out. I don't know why, honestly, that it didn't happen. But here's what I'm going to tell you. That Clean California went to local transportation, right? They're getting grants from the state locally for the Clean California initiative, which is to clean your underpasses, overpasses, beautify your communities. Artists can get grants through that, right? And so there are lots of ways, Mary, I think that we need to be integrated. And that's why I was excited by a number of things that have happened this last year. We're not just in the Arts Council's budget. It's really critical that we increase that budget, but we're also an Office of Small Business Advocates budget, right? We're developing relationships there. We're also meeting regularly with Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We're also meeting with California Department of Public Health. We're also meeting with Workforce Development. We're also meeting with Parks and Rec. We're also meeting with Department of Transportation. So we're showing up in rooms. Tourism. We're invited now to the Tourism Caucus from Visit California, CalTravel. We're showing up in those rooms, and I feel, yes, do I feel like it's shifting? I do. I really feel like it's shifting because people don't understand what they've lost until they don't have it anymore. And they didn't have it these last 2 years. And I think that they finally recognize that it is essential. Our job, and I mean all of our jobs, is to not stop showing up and communicating that message. Because we can't just say it's good enough, that 100 million we got last year or whatever it is. It's still a drop in the budget. Most of this is still budget dust for a state that has $237 billion. We want to be seen in many more ways. And I think the other thing that was learned in this last couple of years is that the arts workforce is a very vulnerable workforce. We are the unhoused. We are the ones facing food insecurity, or the ones not getting living wages. And so I think the more that we can also educate to who we are, what this ecosystem looks like, what it provides, and what it needs, I do think that we can see this change. But it has to be a movement, not just a one-off. And so that's what we hope we can provide, at least some of the legs for that. But we need everyone to engage.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to hand it to Liza. Who needs to unmute?
You're muted, Liza.
That's absolutely hopeless, isn't it, for an advocate? This is the moment where we all talk about, like, what do some local wins look like? And I look particularly to our state local partners, and also to those California cultural districts that are on the call today as well, because you're representing your communities. Well, we're all representing our communities. Share some wins. We all need support. I know we do here in Nevada County, although we feel very pleased with our collective advocacy in this last year with local municipalities in the county. But we'd love to hear from you. Share some wins. Nancy, is that you? Is your hand actually is up?
It is up. Thank you. We've had some really good things going on in our community. A lot of within the cultural district, a lot of partnership, advocacy, and a lot of forward motion on public art, and just the energy. We're coming out of COVID with a lot of incredible energy. Our local theaters are struggling, but they're coming back, along with our dance organizations and our music. The schools are very slow to connect, just because schools are on a different plane artistically, but we're hope to help give them a helping hand out of COVID as well. I did have a question. I know that there's been budgetary examinations on the federal and state level in terms of what kind of income our sector has pre-pandemic infused into our economy. And I know that they've done state and federal level analysis of what that lack of infusion is. Has it actually been done at local levels and then shared with the state? An example would be, I could have all of my local arts agencies and even for-profit organizations, studios, etc., give me what their annual budget was and what it is now, and see what we do infuse in our local economy, and use that as a means of data to help with the advocacy of getting these budgetary things passed.
I love your thinking. I mean, it is also within the remit of a state local partner to do ongoing cultural planning and assessment and evaluation, impact studies, for example. Americans for the Arts is just about starting in May to roll out its next arts and economic prosperity study, and is inviting agencies such as yours across the nations to join in order to get a better picture of what post-pandemic creative sector across the nation looks like. And that's really interesting. Julie, do you have anything to add to that thought from Nancy?
I'm sorry. There are been a lot of studies done. I mean, we look at BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis data, which is something that's really helpful for, you can do by state. You can look at the small business offices, SBA at the federal level. You can look by district, how many small businesses are in your district, how many of those are in the arts. So you can start to drill down. I did that for a federal legislator recently. The Otis report will come out shortly, and that's the Creative Economy report. it used to be just based in Los Angeles, but they've really kind of gone out further. Obviously, last year started to show some of that devastating loss. The Brookings Institute did a really important study, but it was early in like in the beginning of the pandemic. We're hoping that they'll do another one. There's definite need for another state, federal, sort of mass study to see kind of what the impact has been. But Nancy, I'll try to point you to some other stuff. We have it in various places on our website that we're rearranging at the moment. But yeah, there's a good amount of data out there that can show before and after. But I think that, if you are located in a smaller community, I would encourage you to try and do that as much as possible yourself as well.
Yeah. Right. The reason I ask is that I'm hoping we can help you on the state level with our information, if that would be of a benefit too.
Definitely. The more, so I'll be frank too, there are 120 legislators in the state of California. We often prioritize those who are running committees that are going to influence what happens, right? So we will share, particularly in April, you'll get a sense of who those folks are as we ask you to engage. Senator Nielsen, for example, is on Budget Sub 4, which does hold the California Arts Council's budget, and he is many of your representatives. So it is helpful to have that data, because at the end of the day, they care the most about their own district. And so if they see the impact that it can make in their own district, they're more likely to vote in favor. So thank you.
Alyssa.
Yeah, hi, Alyssa. I'm from the Arts Council of Mendocino County. And in terms of successes here in Mendocino County, there has been a ton of enthusiasm for public art and a lot of projects happening. We have the Fort Bragg Alleyway Art Project in Fort Bragg, and that's an easy to find website. City of Ukiah has had quite a few public art projects happen recently. We did one that was on the topic of disaster preparedness with a mosaic artist, and that required a partnership between Listos, California, the city, and the Arts Council. And so we have this wonderful set of mosaics in one of the plazas in town that helps remind people in a visual way, not using too much language, of what they can do to prepare for disasters. And that's wildfires where we are. But the agency, the North Coast Opportunities, that gave us this funding, that I applied for the grant and got it. They ended up having some extra funding left over. Something else didn't happen because of COVID. And so they looked at all of the projects that they had funded, and this was one of the most impactful. So they gave us more money to do another disaster preparedness education project through the arts, and another community in the county that will be more like tsunami related preparedness. So that's something that's been really wonderful. That's kind of come out of the past, couple of years. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to Leslie, Ink People, for gathering us to kind of deepen regional conversations, talking with Humboldt and other counties to the north. One thing that has come out of that is the realization that we can do things to market the entire region as an arts destination. Talk about all of the public art projects that are along Highway 101, for example. And what people can do driving the drive market from Sacramento or the Bay Area, and all of the work that you can see along from Sonoma County through Mendocino County to Humboldt County, and so that kind of regional network, and like how we can kind of amplify the conversation and not just be stuck in our counties with it has I think come about because of Zoom and being able to connect with each other in this way. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for doing this.
Listen, thank you so much. That is completely inspiring and non-linear. David, I can see that your hand is up, and I'm so sorry. I'm gonna call upon Shelley Covert, because she's I know she's running between meetings. I have insider information. Shelley.
Hamakani, thank you. Hello, everyone. So some wins, yeah. Some of the hardest conversations are resolved, or at least given visibility through art, like literal visibility. I'm from a very small tribe in Northern California. We're in Nevada City, Nevada County. We're the Nisenan tribe, and we were at the heart of gold discovery. So we live in gold country, and all identity is around the gold rush, which is fine because we're also part pioneer, or survivors that lived through all of that. And I feel that the arts give us the opportunity to not take away that gold rush identity, but to enhance the actual story and the history. And it has been through the arts and the arts funding and our work. I also sit on the Nevada County Arts Council board. I'm not a very good board member, but I try to show up when I can and give input because we are a very, not culturally diverse area in Nevada County. But it's through the arts we can have these conversations and bring perspective. And we have gotten so much visibility. We just had a mural finished in Grass Valley that is, my younger cousin is in regalia, and there's our baskets and everything. And it's just really incredible. I get all emotional. It's been an incredible, I guess it's been a long ride, but we're finally starting to see some recognition come, and it happens through the art. I feel like it's this little back door where people's defenses don't get up, and we can talk about these real histories that have been just totally, for us, where we've been completely erased in the conversation and in the history books. And so, the more when you see Nisenan, or you hear the word Nisenan in our territory, it's just absolutely never happened before. So, and I really believe that footing comes through the arts, because we can have these conversations and educate people in a beautiful way. So I just feel like we have wins all over the place.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And it's slightly, that slightly makes me sort of slightly want to add, sort of dwell again on what Julie was saying earlier, how incredibly important this conversation about racial and cultural equity is in literally everything we talk about. It's the only way we're going to.
If there is not a little bit of hand-holding going on, our tribe would just be completely erased as it was in the past. And we did a lot of work in the cultural districts, and I'll be totally frank with you all, I did a little eye rolling at the beginning, but it really, we were built into the foundation of our cultural district conversations, and we just don't get left off somewhere. It's like foundational now, and it feels incredible to be seen.
Shelley, we see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
David, come on, put that hand back up.
Okay. I just didn't want to, lots of people want to share. So thank you. David Reed from the Yuba Center Arts and Culture SLP based in Marysville. Yeah, we've got challenges, but on the plus side, since we've been talking about public art, we've had great relationships with a couple of the 4 cities within our 2-county service area, where they've hired us to manage. In fact, Eliza, you started the Live Oak Mural project, which had a great almost 4-year run. We're hoping their new city council will revisit that. It was a collaboration where they put up $20,000 a year. We had to match that with other grants. About $120,000 project. We created, over 20 murals. They're spectacular, real, creative placemaking kind of stuff. So, and then City of Yuba City hired us to begin a mini mural project on utility boxes. That, of all things we've done, has garnered more attention. Just people just love it. It's that kind of little art moment as you're driving around town. So we have great relationships for the most part. One of the challenges, of course, is when staff or electeds move on, and you have to kind of refamiliarize the new folks with what you do. I'm going through that right now in Yuba County. New county council, new chief administrative officer. I've tried to simplify the SLP process for them to get the new resolution created. And as simple as that is, it's been a challenge. I've spent hours trying to not just explain, but come up with solutions. And it's I'll get it, but it's really tough. That and just generally making the case, and I got to hit them in their pocketbooks because it seems to be one of the real touch points here. What's the ROI on that investment? We get $11,000 from both counties combined. Fortunately, we don't rely on that for the bulk of our funding, but it's tough. It's an uphill battle as far as showing them what they get for their. It works out to be about 1/2 of 1 cent per person, 176,000 people in our 2 counties. So we do enjoy great diversity. So we do work very hard to reach out and engage all sectors of the community. I know some of our sister adjoining counties, are a little more white than we are. So that's a great asset for us, and we try to make that a key part of what we offer to the community. So lots of upside, plenty of challenges, but we keep fighting the good fight like you all do. So thank you.
And the point is, David, you keep going back, you keep starting these conversations and restarting them. And that's the key thing, isn't it? And you're stoking familiarity over time. You're doing a great job.
And you bring up the issues of racial equity and land acknowledgements, and I get blank stares, even from our local history commission. They had no idea what that's about. So we're kind of on the leading edge of those conversations too. So thanks for teaching me all about this stuff.
Thank you, David. Nancy, you have your hand up. I think it's from before. And I'm because I can't see any other hands up, I'm almost on the edge of sort of challenging a few people I recognize who are just amazing advocates in their communities. Like, for example, Libby Maynard, you are amazing. Come on, give us an advocacy win in the last year.
Can I go next? My dog walker just arrived.
Oh, okay, that's absolutely fine. Come on then, someone else.
And if you don't want to speak up, feel free to share it in the chat. We only have a few more minutes left, and we'll collate some of these amazing wins as well to reshare with you in a follow-up email, as I think they definitely were inspiring me to be able to lift up the great work that you all are doing in your local areas.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's so easy to think of all the things that, because we're all very ambitious for our communities and ambitious not only for, artists and creative workers and our arts organizations, but also for our communities generally who we're serving. You're doing an amazing job, Barbara, in Lake County. Do you want to speak to, you're quite new as a state local partner ED, and it's just fantastic to welcome you. Tell us what you're up to.
That I was actually typing it because I didn't,
You're so shy.
I am a little shy. I'm getting to know people though. So nice to meet y'all. Lake County is very rural, low income. It's been really quite the challenge, the role I stepped into to try to diversify and bring in people of color. And my biggest win, as of next week, we have a new DEI officer who is a person of color who has joined our board. And that is huge because I really think that will open it up to get more people of color. I actually have 2 other people coming to the board meeting next week also. So I'm starting that, and that was so hard to start. And the other biggest win this year is we're working with the city of Lakeport, which is our county seat, on a strategic plan for the arts that's going to be put into the city. And so those are ours.
That's fantastic. Well done, Barbara. That's great. And I see that Libby's back.
Thank you. My dog is off and running. So I've retired from the Ink People as of the end of last month. And my successor is Leslie Castellano, who is the new executive director of the Ink People, which we are thrilled about.
Great.
So I'm going to be doing art and some consulting. Ink People has actually had a good year, which is ironic. Most of you don't know that we have this program called the Dreammaker program, where we invite local residents and sometimes people from out of the area to propose projects that involve art and culture, and then we fiscally sponsor them. And we have over 100. Fortunately, they're not all active at the same time. And that's one of our biggest assets in the community. And some of them got to be very, very successful during the pandemic, especially Black Humboldt and HC, Black Music and Arts Association, as well as Trajectory, who works with artists who are differently abled. And that's created a conundrum for us because they made so much money that that we overall didn't have a loss. So we've been not eligible for a lot of the programs, but you know, we're still alive, we're still here, we're really cranking on, and Leslie's going to take us to new heights. So, you know, the balance of things here. I don't know if Leslie wants to say something.
I'm happy for other folks to have a chance to speak, but thanks, and I look forward to meeting and working with you all.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Leslie.
Sorry to interrupt the conversation. I just want to honor that we're at our time. And Eddie, if you could fire up just the last few slides. If you have any other wins or things you want to share in the chat, we'll be, again, forwarding to you, having a follow-up email in about a week with a link to the recording and the slides and your comments and resources that you're sharing. So thank you, please keep them coming. And just to wrap up, I want to remind everyone that April is coming up, Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, the state designated month to celebrate the arts, thanks to California for the Arts and you, our members and advocates. And the whole month is devoted to the theme, the arts work. And each week will be broken into a different example of that. The arts heal, the arts build communities, stimulate economies, etc. Some of that arts are part of the solution messaging and framing that we're talking about. So we'll have webinars, we'll have training, we'll have campaigns and actions that you can take locally. And this will all culminate into the last week of the month, Advocacy Week, April 25th through the 29th. Well, we'll support you and organize you into delegations to meet with elected officials, our state officials, via Zoom this year, more than likely, and to be making those asks and building those relationships. So please stay tuned for Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. Depending on how we're doing and keeping everybody safe from COVID, there is a possibility of in-person advocacy, but we'll keep you abreast of that. And next slide, please. And of course, the best way to both stay connected to us and empower us to fight for you is to become a member of Californians for the Arts or California Arts Advocacy, if you aren't already. And with that, I'd love to turn it back over to our leaders and partners to close this out. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone so much for joining us today and for sharing all of your input and sharing time with us today. And thank you so much to our board members and partners, Eliza and Deborah and David, for also being facilitators of this conversation. So with that, we just want to wish you a great afternoon, and we hope, of course, to stay in very close touch with you.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's been fabulous to have you on board and talking, and just stay tuned for everything in connection with Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month.
Great to see you.